Hello and welcome back once again to Movie Reviews. The plan today was to see 5 movies because all the times flowed together. However, I did get off of work that night and then I was trying to stay awake all day. I ended up making it through 3 of them and then I was kind of getting hungry and I was like, well, I'll just go get some nachos or something from the concession stand because I had like a little bit of time before the next movie. And I'm standing there in line, and it's like 10 minutes goes by, the line hasn't moved, and I'm just like getting really tired and more hungry. And I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna go home. I'll go see the other 2 tomorrow. So I made it through 3 movies, one of which I already reviewed, which was Victor Frankenstein, and then the one today, um, which was The Night Before. Since we're getting closer to Christmas, I'm trying to save the Christmas movies till closer to Christmas. So that might tell you what my next one is also. Also, I've been working on the audio, like I said before. I upgraded to Windows 10 and it's completely screwed up my audio settings for my camera. So I'm trying to record them through an exterior program called Audacity, and then I'm trying to match them together in editing, which is a pain in the ass. I tried that before with an older thing, and like the video kept going in and out of sync, and it was a mess. So these might take a little bit longer to edit and get up because of that, but hopefully not. And hopefully at some point I can figure out what the problem is, or I might just have to roll back to Windows 7. I don't know. So anyway, the movie I went to see was The Night Before, the new Seth Rogen comedy, if you can call it that. Uh, what did I think of it? It was okay, I guess. It had its funny points, but mostly I don't even want to really say it was just a stoner comedy because that was only like a minor aspect of it, and like it was really only Seth Rogen's character that was getting stoned, and the way they did it in this one actually kind of worked. But I wish it hadn't been him doing it. I wish maybe it would have been one of the other characters, or why do you always have to play the junkie? Why can't you be the straight man and have someone else be the junkie? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he just likes drugs that much. So basically the concept is it's sort of a coming of age movie, but when they're already adults and in their middle ages. So you got 3 characters. You got Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Seth Rogen, and I cannot remember the other guy's name. Um, their black friend. Well, I cannot even remember his character's name. I think his character's name was like Charles or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character's parents are killed on Christmas, or just before Christmas, I should say, and he doesn't really have any family left, and he's kind of like going through his emotions and whatnot as a teenager who just lost his parents and has to like figure out where the rest of his life is going. And his 2 friends show up, and they're like, we're not gonna let you spend Christmas alone. Let's go out and do some stuff. So they go out and hit these couple places just out of fun. Mostly they're like living out movies. Like there's a lot of references to like Home Alone, a lot of references to Die Hard, The Christmas Story, um, Big, which I'm not sure if Big was even a Christmas movie, but yeah, there's like a lot of references to that. So they're kind of like, hey, let's go. We'll go to Rockefeller Center and see the tree. We'll go to FAO Schwartz and play on the giant keyboard, just like Tom Hanks in Big. Um, we'll go get some Chinese food, and then, which kind of plays into the Christmas Story. They didn't really mention it that much. They more or less passed that off as because I'm hungry. And then they went and did like karaoke at some bar, and then I think there was a 5th thing they did, but I can't remember what that one was. Um, but yeah, so that's like their Christmas every year. The 3 of them get together and go out. Well, now it's been like 14 years, and Seth Rogen's character has a wife and a kid on the way. Uh, the black guy is like a famous football player now, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's the only one who hasn't really moved on and accomplished anything. So they're kind of like, this has to stop. We're kind of like tethering him and not letting him move forward. And he hasn't really grown up, so we kind of got to cut him free. So they all agree that this will be the last year that they do their Christmas tradition because everyone's kind of moving on. And they even say at the end of the movie, it's really hard to stay friends with people when you move, when you have a family of your own and whatnot. So this is their last one together, and it tells this story in the beginning about how at one year they were out, all these people came in and they had just come from a party and they had asked them about the party, and they said that it was this giant party by special invite only called the Nutcracker Ball. So their whole goal, like these entire 15 years or whatever, has been to try and find a way to get to this party. And for like 15 years they haven't been able to find a way to get to it or anything. It doesn't really show that. It just kind of skips 15 years into the future, but supposedly they haven't been able to get to this party in 15 years. So before the night, they're all doing their normal things, it's showing like their day-to-day lives and why they're having to give up this tradition. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt finds 3 invites to the Nutcracker Ball. So he kind of surprises his friends, like, hey, it's our last year together, and look what I got. We finally made it. Then the whole night is them like going out and doing their normal traditions and trying to make it to the ball by the end of the night. And really, there's like no obstacles in their way other than the ones they create for themselves. Like they go to the Rockefeller Center, they see the tree, they go to FAO Schwarz, they do the piano thing, they go get Chinese food, they go to the bar to do karaoke, and they run into these girls that they know, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to the Nutcracker Ball too, or we're going to the Nutcracker Ball. We know, you guys have been wanting to go for years. And he's like, oh, it's okay, I got my own invites. Okay, we'll see you there later. So now they just have to wait for the time that the ball starts. So they're just like running around getting into all these shenanigans up until then. And they're like, we gotta do this. We gotta do this. We gotta make it to the ball. And it's like, just go sit down somewhere until 10:30, and then you can go to the ball. But they create all these obstacles for themselves, which is kind of stupid. Like Seth Rogen, since he's an expecting father, he's been like trying to be strong for his wife because he sees that she's kind of like a mess with the whole thing. So his wife's like, you need a night to relax. So she gives him this whole little box of drugs. She's like, go out and have fun. And he's like the only one that does the drugs through the whole movie. And at one point, he's like, oh, I need something to balance myself out. And they're like, or you could just stop taking drugs; it'll wear off in a little while. He's like, no, I gotta balance myself out. So he just like keeps popping these drugs, and they're like at one point he's just like, at first he just smokes the pot that's in there, and then like he does some mushrooms, and those are screwing him up. So then he's like, okay, I need to balance out. So he does some cocaine. He does like Molly and all this other stuff. So he's like all kinds of messed up because every time he's starting to feel weird, he takes a different drug to try and balance it out instead of just stopping. So he's talking to this girl that's a coworker of his wife at the bar, and like I don't want to give it away, but something ends up happening where she gets pissed off at him and leaves, and they have the same phone and like end up grabbing each other's phone, and then like both of them are freaking out later on in the movie because they both have something sensitive on their phone that they don't want anyone to see. So like what's on his phone is at one point he's in the bathroom doing all the drugs and he starts filming himself talking to his future self, and he's like, this baby's a bad idea, man. Just like put it in a plastic bag and throw it in the river, man, and just get rid of it, like all this stuff. And then he's like so afraid of his wife seeing the video that once his phone goes missing, he's freaking out. He's like, I got my phone back, which they don't even realize he doesn't have his phone until he starts seeing what's on her phone. He starts getting text messages from this guy named James, who's like sending him dick pics. And it's like, he's like, yeah, do you want to suck it and all this? And Seth's like, I've never sucked a dick before. And he's like, well, you will tonight. And Seth's like, okay. So he's like freaking out, like thinking that this guy wants him to suck his dick. Which is probably one of the funniest sequences in the whole damn movie, is him just freaking out about that. Well, now there's other funny parts too, but so then the black character, again, I wish I could remember his name. I'm just gonna call him Charles instead of saying the black guy because that sounds kind of odd. So Charles, the black guy, he has to, because he's a famous football player, he finds out that some of his football buddies from his team are going to be at this party as well. So he calls him. He's like, yeah, hey, I'm gonna be there. I'll see you guys there. And they're like, oh yeah, can you get some weed? And he's like, yeah, I'll get some weed. So they're like trying to find a way to get weed. So they call their old high school drug dealer, so who's this guy called Mr. Green. So they get the weed and they're like going to the party, and then like they stop at the bar, and he ends up having sex with this random girl in the bathroom, and she steals his weed. So now he's like trying to chase her down to get his weed back, and they're like, screw it, we'll just call Mr. Green and get some more weed. So they do that. And then they run into her again, and he's like, hey, you stole my weed. And she's like, yeah, so? And then she's just like talking to him, and she's like, oh, by the way, you're kind of easy. And she like shows that she's got his weed and runs off again. So he's like, oh, I gotta go get the weed back. And he takes off, and then Seth Rogen's character's freaking out, so he takes off, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like sitting there on his own, and he's just like, what the hell? So this is kind of where he has his sort of growing up moment, like your friends are gone, what do you do now? Which is something he hadn't really had to face before. Um, Again, that comes into the one girl that they're chasing down to try to get the weed back is probably one of the best characters in this movie because she's actually a Grinch. Like she said something about not liking Christmas and they called her a Grinch, and she's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. And she even comments that like her favorite Christmas characters are like the Grinch, Ebenezer Scrooge, the Sticky Bandits, and because like she's got tape on her hand, and then she like sticks into this the Salvation Army donation bucket and like pulls out a bunch of money, just like Marv did in Home Alone. Oh, and the other person she said was Hans Gruber. So there's a Die Hard reference. That was the other movie I was trying to think of. Because like at one point he chases her up to the top of a building, and she's standing on the edge, and she goes, my boy Hans Gruber went out this way, and she like leaps off the side of the building. I'm not gonna say what happened to her, but yeah, that's like she's probably one of the best characters in the movie. So then finally they all meet back up at the train station. Seth Rogen's character goes on an adventure as well. This basically involves him like freaking out in a church. I won't go into too much detail on it, but you can just imagine that. So they get to the train station. They meet back up. Joseph Gordon-Levitt had a issue go on with his story too, but like you jump around. You jump between the Charles' character and Seth Rogen's character, or the character of Charles, I should say, and Seth Rogen's character. Their stories back and forth, and you don't really see what's going on with Joseph Gordon-Levitt until like right at the end before they meet back up, and then it's like, oh, by the way, here's what he's been doing. So they all meet up at the train station, which why they're at the train station now, I don't know, because they had a limo that was just driving them around. It did get wrecked at one point, but I think it was still drivable. But yeah, so then they're like all on foot, and then they have to meet up at the train station to take the train to where the party's at, when they could have just called the limo again. But yeah, so they get to the party finally. They go in, and the character Charles is like, hey man, sorry I couldn't get the weed. He's like, oh, no problem, man. You need weed. There's some over there, and there's like this whole big sleigh full of it. He's like, what the hell, man? You had me run all over town trying to get weed, and you had it all here all along. So he's like trying to be cool in front of his teammates because like they're looking at this video that he posted online, and they're like, dude, is this you? And they're like laughing at him. He's like, yeah, it was a charity thing, those are the kids from like Make-A-Wish Foundation or something, and their dream was to go sing karaoke with me or something like that. So he's like trying to play up like he doesn't really know these guys, but then like at the end he turns around and he's like, screw all you, they're my friends. So he kind of has his coming of age moment where it's like, screw who you are becoming, don't ever let your true friends go. Seth Rogen meets back up with the girl who has his phone. They swap phones, and he's like, you didn't look at what was on here, did you? And she's like, no, I didn't. And then she's like, you didn't look at my phone, did you? And he's like, well, of course I did, because the text just started coming in, and I thought it was my phone, so I checked them, and she's like, oh, so you saw what's on it? She goes, yeah, way to go. And she's like, oh, really? You think it's not, like, and basically, like, she was concerned about it being too big and whether or not she could handle it, referring back to the dick pics. And Seth's like, I kind of wondered if I could even handle it, because at first I thought he wanted me to suck his dick, and kind of having this little back and forth about sucking dick, which is weird. And then the James guy shows up, And guess who it is? Of course, it's a Seth Rogen movie. It's James Franco. Spoiler. So then James Franco and Seth Rogen are having this conversation about how nice his dick is, and then James Franco's kind of like, well, we could just like all hang out together, because Seth Rogen had made a comment about he was with two guys earlier, meaning his two friends, and James Franco thinks it means that he was with two guys. So he's like, we could all party together, and like at first, you know, Seth is still high at this point, so he's like, yeah, let's party together, and the girl's kind of like, what, really? Yeah, um, okay, like she's kind of like awkward about it at first, but then she's like, you know, if it gets her with James Franco, cool. So then, like later on, they're all dancing together, and like James Franco keeps ignoring her for Seth Rogen, and then like Seth Rogen's character takes off towards the end, and James Franco turns to the girl, and she's like, and he's like, so did you want to go have sex? And she's like, I think you might be gay, and he's like, well, I'm not gay right now, and she's like, oh well, okay then, so it's kind of an odd little thing. It's a lot funnier than I'm describing it. Like the way it all plays out, it was humorous. Um, so that's kind of like their two wrap ups, and then Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character meets Miley Cyrus of all people, and like Miley's playing up to the stereotypes that you would see in the media from her, like when she was out of control and doing drugs and all that, and she's just like at this party, like getting totally fucked up, and she's like saying all this random shit. And then Jessica Gordon was like, "Really? You're like that?" She's like, "Nah, I'm just fucking with you." And she's like, "I'm high as fuck, or like I'm drunk, or whatever the hell she said. I don't know." So then she somehow convinces him to propose to this girl who he used to date like 6 months ago, who he's not even with anymore. So he gets up on stage and starts singing Wrecking Ball with her and proposes to the girl. And the girl's like in the middle of this club, like, what the fuck are you doing? And then everyone's like, say yes, girl, say yes. So then she's like, yes. And then they like run off together, and he's like, oh great, sorry I didn't have a ring, I'll get you one. And she's like, no, I'm not marrying you, you dumbass, I just said yes because we were in the middle of a bunch of people. They kind of have their falling out, and she leaves, and then he kind of like disappears, and he goes up to the roof to kind of get away from the party and relax for a minute, and he runs into Mr. Green up there, who Mr. Green was kind of freaky through the whole thing, but he had his purpose. So then like Mr. Green kind of has a conversation with him and lets him know, even though it seems like your friends are leaving you, they're never going to truly leave you. And then he kind of realizes that he's right, so he goes off to meet back up with his friends. Um, and that's kind of where the story ends. They do like skip ahead to like a year later. Or actually, no, they skip to the next morning where he goes and apologizes to the girl for proposing to her, and kind of like, I know I screwed up, 3 months, 6 months ago, whatever, 3 months ago, and I'm not asking you to marry me again, but at least give me a second chance. And she's like, I kind of felt bad after we broke up, and I think about you all the time, so yeah. So then it skips to a year later, and all of them have gotten together, but instead of it just being the three of them doing their yearly tradition, now they brought all their families together. Like Seth Rogen, his wife, his daughter are there. Uh, the Charles, I guess I'll call him since I still can't remember his name, and his mother are there because they go to see his mother at one point in the movie. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his girlfriend are there. And I think there might have been a couple other people there that were from the night of the adventure. So yeah, it's that kind of wraps up, and then they're kind of like, you know, that was when they were talking about it's kind of hard to stay friends with people as your life changes, and they're like, but we'll find a way. And then it skips to a year later and shows that they do. And then it turns out like this whole time, which it was revealed at the beginning because it's kind of hard to not notice. Tracy Morgan was the freaking narrator of this movie, so he's like doing the opening narration, and you're like, why is Tracy Morgan in this? And then it cuts to, and then as the movie ends, it cuts back to Tracy Morgan, who happens to be Santa Claus, and he's telling the elves the story from a book, and he's like, so how's that for a Christmas story? Yeah, it's like doing his normal Tracy Morgan speech. Uh, and then it just kind of goes out on that. And that's the end of the movie. Did I think of it overall? I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's one of those weird coming of age movies that at certain points the pacing's kind of odd, but at the same time it's how these movies play out. Like you got to have the characters come together, have their differences, uh, go through their normal stuff, then kind of get in a fight, separate, come back together. So like certain points it's like you break the comedy tension to go off on this side tangent, but then you come back into the comedy with it. So anytime it does that, it kind of throws the pacing off a bit. But you understand that that's necessary this for this comedy to have a backstory. Otherwise, it's just comedy, 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 which would be fine if they just played the whole thing comedic. But they're trying to have a story behind it, and stories have elements that you have to kind of break from what's going on to tell this part. But it probably could have been worked in slightly better than what it was. So overall, on a star rating on this one, uh, I'm gonna give it like a 3.5. It's a decent watch, especially if you like Seth Rogen movies. There is drug humor in this one, but it's not like his normal stoner comedies where it's like everybody in the movie's high and they're just on this wacky adventure because they got high. It's not. It's not one of those types of movies. Like the only one really getting high through the whole thing is Seth Rogen, and that's his character's arc. All the others are just going on their normal way and stuff happens, Or like I said, it's stuff that they create. There's obstacles that they create for themselves, but that's part of the humor in it. Is this stuff doesn't need to be happening to them, except that they make it happen. So yeah, I'm gonna give it like a 3.5. I actually enjoyed this. This is probably one of the first Seth Rogen movies I've actually enjoyed in quite a while. Yeah, and it had James Franco in it, and I normally can't stand James Franco. I normally can't stand the two of them when they're together. But yeah, this one wasn't bad, so I give it 3.5. Like I said, if you like Seth Rogen movies, go check it out. It has drug humor, but not an abundance of it like it normally does. Um, yeah. So not much else to say about it other than that. This video is getting kind of long because I kind of keep rambling and repeating myself. So I'm going to end it here. Again, remember to like, comment, rate, and subscribe, and share the video. And until next time, we'll see you at the movies.